Next, on Currents News, the hunt is on for this woman seen smashing statues. Now they lay scattered beyond repair.
Once wasn't enough. The suspect came back to Our Lady of Mercy twice in 2 days. I'm Emily Drooby with more on the early morning wrecking spree.
Then, what can churches do to stop the sprees? Do we have to conceal our faith? Hear from pastors with plans. And Cuba's rallying cry, heard around the world, started as a hip-hop song. The co-creators have been arrested or are missing. And that fight for freedom reaches Pope Francis. He says he stands with the people. Plus, here comes the bride, more than a dozen of them, an exclusive invitation to the biggest wedding party in Queens. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. Two statues, one of Mary, the other of St. Therese the Little Flower, are now in pieces, scattered across the lawn of Our Lady of Mercy Church. On the broken statues, a sign and a plea asking parishioners to pray for the person who did this. Currents News' Emily Drooby is in Forest Hills with more on the police investigation.
Christine, they've been an important part of the church for over 80 years. Many of the people I spoke with remember seeing them since they were kids, including the church's former leader.
That's First Communion.
From childhood to the 13 years he spent as pastor, this statue outside Our Lady of Mercy Church has been a mainstay in Monsignor John McGuirl's life. Now it lays in pieces on the grass, destroyed, an act of vandalism, along with another.
They're part of the fabric of this parish.
It started last Wednesday when both statues were knocked over for the first time, explains current pastor Father Frank SCHWARZ.
But she only toppled the statues. She didn't destroy them.
They were put back up and secured to their bases. Then on Saturday morning, the pastor emeritus woke up to a loud crash.
I could see the shadow of the statue out in the street already. I yelled out at her, hey, you get out of there, the police will be coming. And she told me inelegantly to keep quiet.
The attack caught on camera. The suspect hops the fence and struggles to detach the statue. Once getting it free, she starts to violently throw it, eventually dragging the pieces out into the street.
I was speechless. I was devastated. I could not believe it.
Mary Jane O'Brien, a parishioner of 70 years, describes the moment she first saw the beloved statue in pieces.
It's just, there's no words. You know, it was a wonderful solace during the pandemic.
One was of the Blessed Mother and the other St. Therese of the Little Flower, the church's first patroness.
They're very much part of our history here, and we're hoping to, I'm sure Father Frank is hoping to replace them and as close as we can.
Police hunting for this suspect, a woman in her mid-20s. Father Frank asking his parishioners to respond not with anger, but with prayer.
She seemed to have a real rage within her, like a real anger. Hopefully they'll pray for her that, you know, she'll try to get help.
The church is working to set up a fundraiser to buy new ones, but Father Frank is afraid that if they put them up before the suspect is caught, she'll just tear them down again. In Forest Hills, Queens, Emily Drooby, Currents News.
The NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force is investigating. There have been no arrests so far. The suspect is described as female in her mid-20s with a median complexion and average build. If you have any information, call Crime Stoppers at 800-577-TIPS. Again, that's 800-577-8477. Acts of vandalism have been on the rise. In the past few months, there have been several disturbing attacks on Catholic buildings. In Queens, Immaculate Conception Parish in Astoria was targeted in multiple spots. The church's pastor saying it was the first time ever in the 14 years he served there. Before that, the head of baby Jesus was knocked off a statue in front of the offices of the Brooklyn Diocese. And in Elmhurst, Queens, a statue of Mary was pushed over and broken into pieces at St. Adalbert's. Police have active investigations in all cases, and the Hate Crimes Task Force is involved. So what happens after such acts of vandalism? The rebuilding, the cost, what parishioners should do to feel safe. Later on in this newscast, Currents News' Jessica Easthope explores next steps. As the highly contagious Delta variant surges in the city, Mayor Bill de Blasio says he will not renew the indoor mask mandate. The decision comes as local leaders express concerns over the recent rise in infections. But according to the mayor, the city will instead double down on vaccinations. Despite new guidance from the CDC, de Blasio says teachers and students will be expected to wear masks when school returns in the fall. Meanwhile, New York lawmakers are voicing concerns over the low vaccination rate among healthcare workers. According to the state health department, nearly a third of New York's hospital workers are still unvaccinated. While New York City Health and Hospitals does not require its staff to be vaccinated, it is encouraging its employees to get the shot. A beloved tradition here in the Diocese of Brooklyn makes a successful comeback. Our Lady of Mount Carmel paraded through the streets once again after the pandemic canceled the event last year. It marks the end of the annual feast at the Williamsburg Church. Current News' Jessica Easthope reports on a community overjoyed at its return.
A float carrying Our Lady of Mount Carmel weaves through the streets of Brooklyn once more. Her following closely behind. Those who have a devotion to her can proudly show their love again after the pandemic robbed them of this joyous day last year.
My whole life is dedicated to the Blessed Mother, and being able to honor her in our traditional Southern Italian way is a joy for me.
Of the hundreds who walked the more than 2-hour route in the blazing sun, Stephen LaRocca's not just another face in the crowd. He's been following this same path for 35 years. Barefoot. Now he gets to share the promise he made to devote his life to Our Lady with Catholics from all walks of life.
This is what Brooklyn's all about. The Haitian community is always united with the Italian community in this devotion. It's a beautiful thing. She's given me everything, Old Mother, so I have to give it back.
Lord our God, send your blessings on these scapulars.
Traditionally, during the procession, people wear these scapulars to remind them of their devotion and love for Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And with every one that's passed out, a tradition is passed on.
She appeared to St. Simon's Stock and made promises that she would protect those who wear the scapular.
This time last year, celebrations were drastically pared down. And even though he didn't know what the future would hold, Monsignor Jamie Gigantiello, the pastor of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, predicted it would come back bigger and better than ever.
The crowds that we've had for the Giglio, the crowds that we've had for the Novena, every night at the feast, it was jammed, and it's wonderful to see.
So this year, as the band played and people prayed as they walked the streets, Monsignor Jamie proudly said his prediction came true. In Williamsburg, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Pope Francis is praying for the victims of the severe flooding decimating parts of Western Europe. The destruction, mostly in Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, has entire communities digging out while coming to each other's aid. A Catholic shrine in Belgium is acting as a shelter. In a letter to the German president, the Holy Father expressed his closeness to all those affected, especially the dead, their loved ones, and all those who have lost their livelihoods. The devastating floods have killed at least 189 people across Western Europe, the vast majority in Germany. Hundreds of people are also missing as cleanup operations continue. Sam Kiley reports from Germany.
A business ruined, slung away almost as quickly as it was washed away. Flash flooding engulfed Thui's Vietnamese restaurant, Phu 68. Her father filmed the rising waters in Auskirchen. It's one of the many towns engulfed by floods that have killed at least 158 people across Western Germany.
A lot of friends, they have a restaurant, a house, it is completely destroyed. I have a lot of friends, they are in near of the water. The house is not standing.
Thui's restaurant had only been open 2 weeks since the most recent COVID-19 restrictions were lifted. Now she's dependent on friends and former diners to help clean up. The violence of the flood is visible everywhere. The disaster that engulfed this town wasn't the result of a swollen river bursting its banks. It was the result of flash flooding, of massive amount of rainfall coming in an incredibly short period of time and created torrents that swept through these streets, often this high. Swollen rivers drained the floods eventually, but looming over the area has been the future of the Steinbachtal Dam. Parts of it collapsed and several villages below it evacuated. Engineers were rushed in to bring its levels down before it burst. Scenes like this and much worse are being repeated across Western Germany and in neighbouring Belgium. Unseasonal rainfall has also hit the Netherlands and Austria and the Czech Republic. While many are grieving, there is an energetic sense of community as cleaning up starts.
I don't know from who, where all the generators come from, where all the pumps come from. I don't know the people around here, but everybody is helping each other.
The costs of this disaster are almost incalculable, but there will be a reckoning when the history of what happened here comes to be written amid the climate change crisis. It's likely to say, this was a warning. Sam Kiley, Ooskirchen.
And in Haiti, a week and a half after the assassination of Haitian President Jovenel Moïse, there's word the country's prime minister is stepping down. Claude Joseph, who had taken over control of Haiti's government after the murder, was scheduled to be replaced the week of the killing with a newly appointed prime minister, Ariel Henry. The power struggle threatened to destabilize the country, already grappling with months of civil unrest. This as Haiti's First Lady, Martine Moïse, arrived back in Haiti for funeral preparations for her husband. She was injured in the attack and treated at a Miami hospital. Inside the Beltway, the budget battles on Capitol Hill continue as President Biden pushes to pass two massive spending bills. Democrats are trying to unite their party over his $3.5 trillion spending resolution, while a key Senate vote looms this week on a more than $1 trillion infrastructure bill. Isabel Rosales reports from Washington.
President Joe Biden touting America's economic recovery as it digs out of a pandemic-driven paralysis.
More than 3 million new jobs all told. That's the fastest growth, I'm told, at this point in any administration's history.
The U.S. is projected to hit growth rates not seen in decades.
6 months in, here's where we stand. Record growth, record job creation, workers getting hard-earned breaks.
A high-stakes legislative deadline looms Wednesday.
We should be united in one thing. Passage of the bipartisan infrastructure framework, which we shook hands on.
The procedural vote aims to pressure negotiators to finalize a deal on infrastructure. Nationwide, there's growing concerns about inflation and how to pay for the massive bill. Lead GOP negotiators argue the bill is not ready for the Wednesday vote.
How can I vote for cloture when the bill isn't written? Unless you want program failure, unless Senator Schumer doesn't want this to happen, you need a little bit more time to get it right.
Well, we're still working on it. It's more important to get it right than to meet an arbitrary deadline, and we are still negotiating.
Inflation is at its highest point in 13 years. Biden insists his proposals are designed to increase the economy's productivity and would lead to lower prices over time.
I want to be clear. My administration understands that if we were to ever experience unchecked inflation over the long term, that would pose a real challenge to our economy.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. Protesters calling for an end to communism. Waves of demonstrators continue to flood the streets in Cuba. We'll have the latest. And thousands are on the line as one man goes the distance to help out kids in foster care. Plus, some 30 couples joined together in holy matrimony. It's a ceremony you won't forget.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
Back to our top story, the destruction at Our Lady of Mercy, sadly, one of many recent acts of vandalism. So how many attacks will it take until churches and schools no longer feel safe having their faith on display? Currents News' Jessica Easthope spoke with two pastors on opposite ends of the Diocese of Brooklyn about what happens after the vandalism.
Broken into pieces, hurled violently from a shrine. This scene has become increasingly common. But what happens when the financial cost and emotional toll are too much to bear? Will churches and schools be forced to keep displays of faith out of public view?
She ripped these down, smashed them down.
It's been 2 years, and Father Joseph Jude Gannon says it still hurts. Under cover of darkness, this woman tore down the rosary stations at St. Gerard Majella Parish, the damage costing upward of $20,000.
She was here for like 45 minutes.
Things can be replaced, but Father Gannon says the feeling lasts, which is why his solution is more security and education.
We should invite people to understand what they are, what they're about, why we have them.
Many religious artifacts are precious in more ways than one. Real gold, exquisite detail, handmade, imported. This statue cost $7,000, and this one stood here for more than a century. In May, this wooden crucifix at St. Athanasius in Bensonhurst was toppled to the ground and broken. Another $20,000 price tag, especially as collections suffered during the pandemic.
Temporary.
But Monsignor David Casado says removing it altogether is not an option.
You can't let people that hurt win. And what's the expression? Good conquers over evil.
Protecting property is important, but Monsignor Casado wants faith to get right up in the face of hate.
Being able to go up.
Instead of building it higher, he wants to take the fence down.
Bringing the faith into the streets, allowing people access.
He's trying to pull it down.
The vandalism might still happen, but the statues remain a powerful symbol welcoming people in. If they disappeared, who would it serve? Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Now to the unrest in Cuba, where a wave of protest continues to spread. Demonstrators calling for freedom and an end to communism. Meanwhile, in Miami's Little Havana, Cuban Americans continue to rally in solidarity, hoping the protests in their homeland don't lose their spark. They're demanding Cuba's president listen to his people, and they're demanding U.S. President Joe Biden step up. Biden says his administration is reviewing its Cuba policy. Pope Francis is keeping Cuba in his prayers. During his Sunday Angelus, the pontiff expressed his closeness to the Cuban people. Many pilgrims from Cuba were in St. Peter's Square to remind the Pope of the protests going on in their country. Francis says they are facing difficult moments as they struggle with inflation, food shortages, and the coronavirus pandemic.
Il Signore che lo aiuti a costruire in pace, dialogo e solidarietà una società sempre più giusta e fraterna.
Many lay people and priests who joined protesters in the streets were arrested. Father Ronaldo Montes de Oca from the Archdiocese of Cuba says the situation is very tense and they need help.
We need international support. We need the world to see what the Cuban people are living and suffering, a lack of freedom and a lack of opportunities. We need the world to see their need to protest justly and peacefully so that this violence can end, so that the people can be heard, so that Cuba can have the dignified future it deserves.
The Catholic Bishops' Conference in Cuba has called for reconciliation and dialogue. The dialogue among protesters is actually the words of a hip-hop song. The lyrics have become a rallying cry on the streets of Cuba. Isabel Rosales spoke with one of the artists behind the viral hit about the power of music and where he sees the future of Cuba.
It's the protest anthem echoing from the streets of Cuba to Florida. But this chant of homeland and life started as a hip-hop song. Yotuel Romero, a Cuban exile and popular artist living in Miami, turned a communist regime slogan on its head.
Venimos de patria o muerte. O sea, al cambiar la muerte por la vida, ¿quién no quiere cambiar la muerte por la vida? Todos.
Romero is one of several artists behind the viral hit turned protest anthem. He says his co-creators still in Cuba have been arrested or are missing. Music video director Asiel Babastro says the song resonated because it gives voice to the realities of living in Cuba.
Que era honesta, porque era verdad. O sea, la canción no trae una denuncia, lo que es básicamente una observación de esa realidad y sobre todo una traducción de esa realidad al mundo.
Last Sunday, unprecedented protests erupted across the island, where the viral hit is banned. Crowds demanding freedom, sick of oppression and shortages on basic goods.
El pueblo llegó un momento en que ya dijo basta.
Cuban Americans in Florida shouting the same rallying cry in solidarity.
Patria y vida basically just means like, we want, our life, like, to grow from this and not be like oppressed by the government.
Patria y Vida joins a long list of protest music, sending a social message and calling for change.
There's many different kinds of protest music. You've got the angry rant that's biting and direct, such as a Killing in the Name of by Rage Against the Machine. You've got the harrowing, haunting lament.
Black bodies swinging in the sun.
Such as Nina Simone's version of Strange Fruit, which many folks mark as the beginning of the civil rights movement.
Strange fruit hanging.
Music is such a powerful mechanism to communicate messaging and about culture and social issues. It's sewn into a singular language, right? It unifies. It embeds itself in the minds of people and keeps a anthemic message looping in there.
For some, music is not enough.
No queremos música porque hay gente muriendo y cuando hay muertos hay que hacer silencio.
But for its creators, their whole Patria y Vida is just a spark.
El poder de cambiar Cuba lo tiene el propio cubano.
In Miami, Isabel Rosales.
Still to come on Currents News. They do. Why dozens of couples got married on the same day at the same Queen's church. And running for a reason, actually thousands of reasons, and how foster kids will benefit. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Running 20 miles across the 5 boroughs, hoping to raise $21,000 for city kids in foster care. This is how Patrick O'Sullivan starts his mornings, but in 2021, his daily runs have had a lot riding on them. Patrick raised $10,500 and matched it for Catholic Guardian Services Youth Employment Initiative. It's a job training program for kids aging out of foster care, many of whom often end up homeless or in prison. And on Saturday, Patrick, who's a Catholic Guardian board member, pounded the pavement. Patrick grew up and went to school right here in the Diocese of Brooklyn. He said the run took him a little over 3 hours, but this money will make a lifetime of difference for these kids.
Giving them an opportunity to just learn the skills they need to find a job and to be independent is a really great opportunity to live out that faith through the organization.
Donations kept pouring in even after Patrick reached his goal. He'll be donating nearly $26,000. Wow. Patrick says even though he's finished 17 marathons in his life, he's never run for a cause before, so he calls this his most important race. Over in Queens, 30 couples all celebrated their special day on the same day. Talk about an extravagant ceremony. The lucky couples gathered at Our Lady of Sorrows over the weekend to join together in holy matrimony. The celebration was organized by the church's family ministry team. Its goal, to promote the sanctity of married life. Congratulations to all the lucky couples, and what a party that must have been. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.